Well, today we've invited the parliamentary candidate for Northampton North, Michael Ellis. He's come here to have a look around the college, also speak to you guys. Michael has been an MP in the previous government, and the government has now dissolved, so he's campaigning, going around canvassing on doors and what have you. So it's an opportunity really for you to speak directly to him, as some of you will be first-time voters. But Michael will just say a little bit now about himself, and then we'll open the floor.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon everyone, and thanks ever so much for turning up. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. We're obviously just over 3 weeks away from the general election. As William was saying, I've been the Member of Parliament for 5 years. I was first elected in 2010. And first of all, perhaps I'll just say a couple of words about myself, because I know there's a sort of popular image that Members of Parliament sort of live in castles with moats and drawbridges and things of that sort. Only one or two tend to. The reality is I was born in Northampton, brought up here, and have lived and worked here my whole life. My father was born in Calcutta. He came to England as a teenager. He's 84 years of age now. He didn't have any money when he came over, but he worked, and he's extremely proud of the fact that his son has been a Member of Parliament in the House of Commons, as you can imagine. But I benefited from the hard work that he put in. I had a good education. I still live in the house that I first bought when I left my parents' house here in Northampton, in fact within walking distance of this college. And I very much enjoyed my 5 years as an MP. One of the things I was just saying to a couple of your colleagues, students, was that we're at a time now so close to a general election when MPs are saying lots of things. Politicians are saying lots of things. And they're saying what they're going to do in the future. And I think that that's all very well, but you're obviously going to be sceptical about whatever any politician says weeks before a general election. I think one of the best ways of judging a politician, especially around about now, is not what they tell you they're going to do in the future, but because you can't tell, can you? But what they have done in the past. That is perhaps one of the safer ways of judging how they're going to conduct themselves in the future. And that isn't quite so susceptible to manipulation as anything someone might say about what they're going to do in the future. I'm very proud of my record as MP for Northampton North. I was just very recently ranked by an organisation called Write to Them, which is an independent website which facilitates people writing to their MPs via email. And they ranked me first out of 650 MPs for responding efficiently to my constituents' emails. I was the only MP in 2014 with a 100% record of having responded to my constituents. I'm very proud of that, and it's actually largely thanks to my staff who helped me with the vast volume. Most MPs have constituents numbering about 65, 70,000. That's certainly the case in Northampton North. And as you can imagine, with 65,000 constituents, there's a very large volume of emails. But it's part of my function, I think it's part of all MPs' functions, to keep in contact with their constituents, which is harder than you might think. Those of you in marketing may well know a bit more about that. But it is more challenging than might immediately be apparent. And also you are starting from a pretty difficult base. Most people, for very understandable reasons, are very sceptical about politicians of any colour, any political party. And therefore, you really do need to, if you like, start on an uphill as a politician and show to people your willingness to do the work, whatever political party you may be. And so, having been ranked first just a couple of days ago by Write to Them was something I was very pleased about. Two other things I was very pleased about was that I was ranked fourth out of all 650 MPs by an organisation, an independent website called writetothem.com, which you can look up yourselves, for attending votes in the House of Commons. So votes can take place, there have been well over 1,000 of them over the last 5 years, 1,200 I believe. They can take place any time of the day or night. It's one small way of judging how hard your local MP is working. I was ranked fourth. Only 3 MPs out of 650 attended more votes than I did. I attended 91%, nearly 92% of all votes. And finally, out of the 650 MPs, rateyourmp.com rated me 13th out of 650 for value for money. because of the low number of expenses that I claim. I made a point, following the expenses scandal in 2009, before I was elected in 2010, to not claim any expenses that I really didn't have to. So I don't claim anything for food and drink. I don't claim anything for travel. I take that all out of my salary. I don't have any other earned income. I don't do any secondary jobs, anything of that sort, unpaid directorships or anything of that, or paid directorships, I should say. So my source of income is my MP's salary. And the reality is that I've not claimed for any train ticket, any taxi, any litre of petrol since I've been an MP. And I've underspent my staffing budget and my office costs budget by over £200,000 over the course of the last 5 years. So that's a little bit about me. I've wanted to say 2 or 3 minutes about me because I'm sure you're going to ask me lots of questions about policy. And I thought I'd leave that bit to you, and I'll do my best to answer what I can. So on that note, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, so questions. Anyone got any questions for Michael at all?
What are you going to do with the NHS? Because obviously these days the treatment's going to get more expensive.
Yeah.
Are you going to invest more money into the NHS?
Thank you, that's a really good question. Yeah, we are going to invest more money into the NHS. And what I would, again, urge you to have a look at is what we have done in the last 5 years, as well as what we're promising to do in the next 5. So we have invested £13 billion in the NHS in the last 5 years, and that's despite very difficult, challenging economic times. We've recently promised to invest a further £8 billion over the coming cycle. So it is a lot of money. I heard a statistic, however, only just a few days ago, which is quite extraordinary and which surprised me, and that is that just since the last election, since 2010, there are 1 million more people who are over the age of 65, just from 5 years ago. And there's no question that the NHS is under considerable strain and pressure. But it is a wonderful institution. Several of my cousins, strangely enough, didn't go into law like I did. They went into medicine and have worked in the NHS, one of them for a time at Northampton General Hospital. And it is a very precious institution that we must cherish. But we have to face up to the fact that it costs a huge amount of money, and these costs have to be funded. And so what I would say about the NHS is that we will protect it, we will fund it, we will support it, and we do that not by shaking any magic money trees, but actually by making sure that our economy is strong, money is coming into the Treasury, so that the Treasury can send it to the NHS, and for that matter, to things like defence, schools, roads, and everything else that public money goes to. So, in short, we want to support the NHS, and I'd just say we've created 8,000 more doctors and over 5,000 more nurses in the last 5 years, and we've cut tiers of bureaucracy in order to help pay for that, because it was becoming extremely bureaucratic with layers of bureaucracy within the NHS. And obviously the primary concern has to be patients and the medical staff that treat them. So I hope that helps. Any others? Yes, sir.
So after investing all this money,
Yeah.
I saw on the news that the NHS is at the lowest point it's in crisis.
Yeah.
So will investing more money help, or is it going to just add
It
fuel to
will
the fire?
partly help, but I think you've got your finger on the button there, because just putting money into something isn't only the answer to anything. And I'll give you an example of another public service that has had to be cut quite severely, and that's the police. We did have to make severe cuts to policing, and Conservatives, who are traditionally the law and order party, it's alien to Conservatives who didn't like that prospect. Nevertheless, despite those cuts to policing, we've seen crime rates down by 20%. Now, you could ask why that is, and there are some experts who are not quite clear why that is, to be perfectly frank. Crime rates are going down around the world, in places like New York and elsewhere too. But it goes to show you that you have to be slightly more sophisticated than just assuming more money always gets a better result. It's how you spend the money. So what Sir Bernard Hogan Howe, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, did with less of his money is he put fewer of his officers in the police stations filling out forms and more of them on the streets. So believe it or not, despite he's had a 20% cut in his budget, there are more police officers on the streets than there were when he had a bigger budget. And that may have something to do with it. The same thing applies to the NHS. It is about giving the NHS more money, but it's also about making sure it's spent properly. So, I've had people say to me who work in the NHS that, they work in an office suite, an administrative suite, not in this county I might add, but they have said that they get a new computer every 3 years, even if there's nothing wrong with the old computer. Now, arguably that is an area of waste that we can rectify. If there's nothing wrong, I'm still using the same computer that I was given 5 years ago. I assure you, if it breaks, I would ask for a new one. But if it's still working fine, I see that's an example of how we spend money wisely and get good results. Yes, sir?
Yeah. I want to move on to university fees. Will
Yeah.
you be raising or lowering the university fees for our generation?
Well, the short answer to that is it remains to be seen. I can't give you an answer about that because
Labour's promising, stating that they'll lower.
yes. Well, of course, the reality is that the vast majority of people in this country, the taxpayer, didn't go to university or any form of tertiary education. If we are going to ask taxpayers to fund something, I think we have to be fair about what they're funding. And we have to make judgment calls about what is appropriate to fund. So if you're going to fund students going to university or to tertiary education of any sort, then you're going to have to cut it from somewhere else. And the Conservatives have made the judgment call, and I think rightly, that it is fairer and more appropriate for students to pay for their own education, heavily subsidised though it still is, rather than asking taxpayers who didn't go to uni to pay for it. Now, I appreciate that that is a judgment call that not everyone would agree with. The Scottish, for example, have made the judgment call that university education should be free. But for that, they have to either tax people higher or they have to cut something else. And I think the way that this has been funded, tuition fees has been funded, is fair and appropriate in all the circumstances, especially as it's extremely generous in terms of the payback route. Many people, it's true, won't ever have to pay back if they don't earn the requisite sum later in life. And that will also be a burden to the taxpayer. But as I say, it's a judgment call that's been made based on fairness for all. Yes?
What are you going to do to help support young people who have found themselves in difficult situations with the law or unemployment?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, as I was just saying, I've had personal experience before I was a politician about young people who are in trouble with the law. Having been a barrister in criminal practice, a good chunk of my practice was dealing with young people between the ages of 16 and 25. My youngest client was 11 years old, ladies and gentlemen, and this was some years ago, and he'd stolen a double-decker bus. He needed to stand on something to press the pedal. Yes, so I had that experience. As to how we can help young people, this is something that's particularly important to me. Not only because of my previous experience outside of politics, but also because I'm a politician because I value the future of this country. And that's why, and the young people represent that future. And that's why it is important to me. So, how are we going to help? Well, the first thing we do is by having a strong economy that creates jobs for young people to go into when they're ready to do so. Now, we've created 1.85 million more jobs over the last 5 years. This is a record number. Not only is it the fastest growing rate of employment, we now have more people in employment in this country than ever before. We also have more women in employment than ever before. Youth unemployment has gone down by 63% in Northampton North, the constituency that I represent, where we are now currently located, since 5 years ago. And unemployment generally has gone down by 50% in Northampton North. It's still too high, there's still more to do, but unemployment is a key factor, youth unemployment a key factor. We make sure the engine of the economy is burning and churning so that we can create jobs for young people. That's the best way to help people, by having a strong economy so that there are jobs there for them. Sorry, was there another part to your question?
It was just how would they change their lives around and get into jobs and training and things like
Yeah,
that?
well, apprenticeships is another feature. So 2 million more apprenticeships have been created in the last 5 years. And there's a promise to create 3 million more. So I always urge caution about the promises, as I said at the very start. But look to the past if you want to judge the future. And we have created 2 million more apprenticeships in the last 5 years. There's a promise to create 3 million more going forward. So that helps people for whom university or college education isn't a choice they wish to make. And I think that's something that many people have found advantageous to their own personal circumstances. So I hope that helps. So I've just been out, at the moment we're out canvassing, door knocking many hours a day, and that explains my tan. I haven't been in the Bahamas. I have been door knocking. We obviously seek to canvass people's views at this time close to a general election. But I've actually been doing that throughout the whole of the last 5 years. We knock on doors, we put leaflets out. So I'm responsible for a good quantity of junk mail that people get through their doors. But it's one of the best ways we still have of communicating with people about what we're doing in the constituencies that we represent. So would anybody else like to ask anything about policy?
What's your main policy that will affect our generation?
I do think that it is all about the economy, because everything stems from that. If you think about it, even very briefly, the talk about the National Health Service, which is extremely important to us, but the talk about law and order, the talk about the quality of our roads. I've done quite a bit of campaigning over the last 2 or 3 years about potholes, and I got extra money for that. Whatever you talk about, almost whatever you talk about, needs money. And that's why when you say, what's the most important thing, I think the economy has got to be central to that argument, because it's what pays for everything else. If I want to get extra money from the Chancellor of the Exchequer for my area to pave roads, because the concern of most of my constituents when they responded to a survey was the quality of roads and footpaths, then I need money from the Treasury needs money to do that. I've had armed forces members saying there's not sufficient money in the defence budget. We've got aggression from Putin, we've got problems elsewhere. How do we fund that? It's money. The National Health Service in population is increasing. Pressures are increasing because of longevity. Life expectancy is going up, which is a good thing, dramatically. And medicines are being invented, which are A, extremely expensive, and B, very effective. And therefore they put more strains on the National Health Service. So it all needs money. So there are very few areas of government or policy or public life that don't rest on having a strong economy. And that's why I think it is so important.
You mentioned earlier about you created more jobs over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
How would you say you would educate people of our age? Like, what's the best job for them to go into?
Right.
To help the economy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got to do something that you enjoy. It's sometimes tempting to go into a line of work that you think that would be the most lucrative. When I was a young lawyer or legal student, everyone was saying, well, the best areas of law to go into are commercial law, company law, because they pay the most. I knew I'd hate them. I knew I'd be bored with that very quickly. And criminal law, especially legally aided criminal work, pays the least in legal areas. But I decided that for me it was more important to do something that I wanted to do. And I would just recommend that you look to something, of course, how lucrative it is a very important part of the decision process. But you've got to enjoy what you do, because if you enjoy what you do, you'll be good at it, and you'll also be successful at it. And so be prepared to to look widely, think outside the box, and work hard, actually, just work hard. I mean, a lot of credit for some of the statistics that I was boasting about at the very beginning. It's down to my staff, who are local people to Northampton. One of them comes from Cambridge, actually, but two of my young staff, I took them on early 20s, Northampton people, and they've worked extremely hard and have achieved a very great deal, and I'm very proud of them. When they're finally ready to leave me and go and do something else, they'll be able to have real achievements on their CV, because they put the work in. And I think it is about that. It's a cultural decision that people don't owe you anything. You have to work to achieve something. And that is a mindset that I would just recommend going forward. And it will lead to much more likely to lead to success.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Okay.
Hey guys, that's all that Michael's got time for, because he is very busy leading up to the election. I hope that has helped, actually meeting the politicians and hearing some of the views that they've both got to say. Remember, some of you will be first-time voters come May the 7th. Therefore, you may not want to vote. If you do, then make sure you have your voice heard.
Yeah.
And if you're impressed by what Michael has said, then you put the X next to his name. Simple as. So,
can I ask, I mean, how many of you, I don't want to ask you how you're intending to vote, but how many of you actually intend to vote for someone? So it seems about 50, a bit more than 50%, is it? Yeah. So there's quite a high proportion of people who are not going to vote at all. Is that right?
Some aren't old enough.
Oh, some are. Sorry. I should probably ask how many of you intend to vote who can vote, who are over 18? Pretty much everyone. Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm very pleased to have been here. And if I've got 5 minutes, if anybody wants to speak to me down here more privately, I'm happy to have a chat. But thank you again for your patience.